The Great Molasses Flood, otherwise known as the Boston Molasses Disaster, occurred on January 15, 1919, in a North End neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. This is the story. Molasses is a thick, dark syrup that is created during the sugar-making process. The sugarcane is first crushed, followed by the juice that is created, then extracted. The juice is then boiled down to form sugar crystals that are then removed from the liquid. The viscous, brown syrup that is left after the removal of the sugar from the juice is subsequently called molasses. This process can be repeated several times, each time producing a different type of molasses. Molasses itself can then be fermented to produce ethanol. The process involves first diluting the molasses in water to bring down the sugar concentration to about 8 to 10%. Then, if needed, ammonium salts are added. Following this step, the solution that is collected then has yeast added to it. To put it simply, during this final process, the sucrose is converted into ethanol. Why all the information? Well, the disaster we are talking about today took place at the Purity Distilling Company that was located near Keeney Square. At the facility, large amounts of molasses had been stored. The company used the harbor-side commercial street tank to offload molasses from the ships. They would then store it on site before later transferring it by pipeline to the Purity Ethanol plant that was located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The tank that held the molasses stood 50 feet tall, or 15 meters, by 90 feet in diameter, or 27 meters. This massive tank held as much as 2.3 million gallons of molasses in it at the time of this incident. It was January 15, 1919. It had been a bitter cold January, but on this day, the temperature had risen above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, or 4 degrees Celsius. Just one day earlier, a ship had come in and made a delivery of fresh molasses. In order to reduce the viscosity of the molasses for transfer, the molasses had been significantly warmed up. It is believed that what happened next was due to the thermal expansion of the older, much colder molasses when combining with the warm, fresh molasses. It was around 12:30 p.m. Workers at the facility were busy with their daily routines. Some were taking their lunch breaks and enjoying the small bit of warmth that the day had provided them. Unbeknownst to all, things were just mere moments from taking a turn for the absolute worst. The ground began to shake. A deep rumbling, followed by a thunderclap, came from the tank holding the 2.3 million gallons of molasses. Onlookers began to hear what they could only describe as machine guns going off as the rivets shot out of the tank one by one. Before anyone could react, the tank gave way, and a rush of sweet-smelling air picked up and tossed numerous people like they were nothing more than dust in the wind. At the same time, a truck was hurled directly into Boston Harbor. The initial rush of air was followed by a torrent of molasses as it began to swallow up everything in its path, like the blob from outer space. It was truly a scene straight out of a B-level horror movie. Now, to add more context to everything, the density of molasses is about 1.4 metric tons per cubic meter, or 12 pounds per US gallon. This means the molasses is 40% more dense than water. This means the molasses has a great deal of potential energy, and the collapse would translate this energy and turn it into a 25-foot or 8-meter high wave that was moving at upwards of 35 miles per hour. entire buildings were swept straight off their foundations. What made matters even worse is the temperature outside. Once the initial wave had passed, the molasses slowly became extremely viscous, trapping numerous people that got caught in the initial wave and making it next to impossible to escape from its sticky sweet grasp. Numerous people were crushed by the debris that was carried along in the first explosion of molasses. Others simply got caught in the substance and drowned as they were unable to free themselves from its unyielding chokehold. When all was said and done, 150 people ended up injured to varying degrees, while 21 people and a multitude of horses would meet their horrible fate on this day. In the aftermath of it all, 116 cadets from the nearby USS Nantucket would arrive on scene first. The cadets arrived at the accident and without any hesitation entered into the knee-deep lake of molasses, doing all they could to pull out any potential survivors. The Boston Police, Red Cross, Army, and Navy personnel would soon arrive on scene. They too began to help in the search for survivors, while others tended to the numerous wounded. A makeshift hospital would end up being put together on site as doctors and surgeons and nurses worked late into the night and the following morning. For 4 days, all efforts were made to save as many people as humanly possible. At the end of the 4th day, the search would cease, as many of those that were left were so ensnared in the molasses that they couldn't even be identified. It would then take another 3 to 4 months before a few other bodies were located within the waters of Boston Harbor. The cleanup itself would take weeks to complete, as several hundreds of people contributed to the daunting effort. In the aftermath of it all, 119 residents brought forth a class action lawsuit against the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, which had purchased Purity Distilling a couple years prior in 1917. It would be one of the first class action lawsuits in Massachusetts and has been praised throughout history for paving the way for modern corporate regulations. After a long 3 years of court hearings, the company would ultimately pay out $628,000 in damages, which is roughly $10.6 million in 2023 when you adjust for inflation. It's reported that families of the victims received around $7,000 each, which is roughly equivalent to around $118,000 today. The reason for why this tragic event occurred isn't 100% clear, but after a thorough investigation, there were several factors that are believed to have contributed to the event. One belief is that the tank had been leaking since the first day it was filled back in 1915, while numerous reports of poor construction in almost every facet of the tank's design have been pointed to. No matter the reason, 21 people lost their lives in this tragedy. I have covered numerous cases involving horrible fates, and this is by far one of the most terrifying ways to have your life extinguished. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode. If you enjoy the content, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps the channel continue to grow. Also, you can check the description box below and find the link to my merch store. Tons of awesome designs, and the proceeds help fund the channel. I also just started a new membership tier for the channel. It's $2.99 a month and comes with some pretty cool perks, so if that interests you, then please go check it out. As always, I do all the research, writing, recording, and editing for the channel myself, so anything you do to support the channel is greatly appreciated. Until next time, I will see you all again as we head back into the cellar.